Okay, good evening and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube. Just Daf It. A little late edition today. Um, every so often I need a break. Also, I'm human. I'm not a robot. So I went out to breakfast with my wife. To a nice restaurant in Yerushalayim. It's called Ricotta. Here we say ricotta cheese, whatever. It's a very nice restaurant, classy. Wasn't even that expensive. Got like this Tuscany omelet, pesto inside. It's pretty good. Get some yogurt, some cassia bread, nice salad. It was pretty good. Some dips, cream cheese, avocado dip. All right, let's get started. It is late. Daf Chesem and Aleph, Chet number 8. The Mishnah on the top. Hareini Nazir Kasar Roshi Ukafara Aretz Cholayam. He says I'm a Nazir, like the amount of hairs on my head, like a person like me that has their hair still. A person like Andrew Tate. And now he's in prison, so his hair grew back, but. Uh, person who has hair, kafara aretz, like the dust of the earth, kol yam, the amount of specks of sand on the shore. Hariza nazir olam, he's a nazir forever. Meaning, as we explained yesterday, it's like he's makabel a 30-day nazirus for every hair that he has, or for every piece of sand. So therefore, his nazirus, it's infinite, right? Amount of nazirus. However, there are a bunch of periods of nazirus. So after 30 days of nazirus, he concludes that nazirus. He brings the karbanos, he shaves his head, and he starts the next nazirus forever. Rabbi Yomer, Rabbi is very machmir. He says actually, when you say I'm a nazir like the hairs on my head. So let's say if you would potentially count the hairs in your head, I don't know, you get maybe 10,000, maybe close to that. So, it's like instead of saying 10,000 30-day periods in Naziris, you're 10,000 day Naziris, which is much more severe because it's not even like a Nazir Olam, or according to Rebbe, you get every 12 months to get a haircut. Here, you never get a haircut. It's like, unless it's possible you could live for 10,000 days, right? 10,000 days would be, a number of years, more than 120, I think. So, someone should do the math. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but for a long time. So you're probably never going to get to shave your hair or cut your hair. When there's the type of Nazirus that you actually took 30-day periods of Nazirus, now, it's not clear who says Nazirus or Naziros. Naziros is plural. I would like to read Rebbe, he's saying Naziros, right? Plural. Right? The periods in Naziros as corresponding to the amount of hairs I have, or the dust of the earth, or the sand in the sea. I mean, Nazir Mole Habayas, because in that case, you explicitly said, I'm taking this amount of 30-day Naziros periods, and therefore you could shave every 30 days. Harini Nazir Mole Habayas, Mole Akupa. I'm a Nazir corresponding to filling the house with something. We don't know what he's talking about. Mole Akupa, filling the basket, the box with something. Both can also. We check him. Imamar Achaz Gedol and Azarti, right? I just meant to say one big Nazirus, like a box or like a house, right? A big Nazirus, like we said yesterday in the Mishnah. Nazir Shloshim Yom, right? Even to say Nazir Gadol, right? It's like a regular Nazirus. He meant to say one period of Nazirus, 30-day Nazirus. If Imamar Stam Nazarti, he says, no, I actually meant to say, right, the amount of stuff that would fill a house or fill a box. We look as it as if the box is filled with mustard seeds, or very small seeds. Any box you fill with them he'll be a Nazir for his entire Nazirus. Now, this is like the opinion of the Tanakama, right? That anytime you say any Nazir, let's say mustard seeds, so each mustard seed represents a 30-day period of Nazirus. And like we said in the first case, he would get to shave every 30 days. He had to shave every 30 days. Now, Harini Nazir Mikan ad Makom Ploni. He says, I'm a Nazir from here until I get to another place. Only Kama Yama Mikan Makom Ploni. You evaluate not actually how many days he travels, but how many days it would take to get from here to that place. Makom Ploni. If normally people can walk there, I think it's walking because nowadays you can fly across the world in 24 hours. So must be talking about walking there. If it's less than 30-day walk, Nazir Shloshim Yom. The shortest Nazir that we said yesterday could be 30 days. The Imlav, Nazir Kaminyan Hayamim, if it's longer than 30 days, so he's a Nazir for the amount of days it takes to walk. For example, 45, 50. Harini Nazir Kaminyan Yamosachama. I'm a Nazir like the counting of the days of the solar calendar. Monin Nazirus Kaminyan Yamosachama. He counts in Nazirus like the amount of days in the solar year. Now, again, this probably follows the opinion of the Tanakama. When you say Harini Nazir, right? Meaning we don't say it's a 365 day Nazirus, which is not that long. It's a 1 year Nazirus. No, we say every day of the 365 days is another 30-day period Nazirus, right? And that's why Amar Rabbi Yehuda Ma'iseh came as Jehish Lemeis. Rabbi Yehuda adds there was an incident that happened, right? After he finished all of his Nazirus, he died because it took 365 times 30, which is about 30 years, right? 30 years, 365 days a year times 30. So it took him 30 years. That's why it makes sense that he died afterwards. I mean, to say that he died after 1 year, I mean, maybe he had a heart attack, but usually that's what Rabbi Yehuda was teaching us. The Gemara will explain that's what he's saying. The Gemara says, one part of the Mishnah, he says, I'm a Nazir like filling up a box, right? We view what's in the box. He doesn't say what's in the box, what's filling up the box. Mustard seeds. The Nazir Kol Yama. It's Nazir forever. Maybe it's a small box. He meant to say it's full of cucumbers and gourds, squash. With the heavy like that kanta. Cucumbers can be big, 2 or 3. 2 or 3 periods in the zeros. 90 days. Amar Chizkiah Machlokas Shnuya. Chizkiah says our Mishnah is actually the discussion of a Machlokas Hanoim, where we mentioned Mezachas Nadarim. Rabbi Shimon he has Rabbi Shimon the Amar Adam Machnis Atmo. In a case where we're not sure if the person undertook something, right? L'chumra or he took something l'kula. So it's machlokes Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, right? The Gemara there is talk, for example, the Sanya. What's the case? I'm becoming a Nazir. I'm stipulating it. I'm making contingent on the fact that in this pile is 100 quart, which is a big amount. Right? It's like betting with his friend. He tried to measure it, but it was stolen or lost. They couldn't measure it. Shimon he says he becomes a Nazir because he meant to Makabal Nazirus. If in the case where it was unable to figure out how much core there was, he went l'chumra, and he took the Nazirus upon it. Shaving Nazirus lahachmir, shaving Nazirus to go lahachmir. Yehuda Matir. He says he's not a Nazir. Shaving Nazirus lahachil. He didn't include in his case a case where you can't ascertain how many measurements are in that pile. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Afilu Tamer Rabbi Yehuda, our Mishnah can follow Rabbi Yehuda. Hasam l'nachas lein Nazirus." Right there, we're unsure if he even took the Nazirus upon himself. Right? We don't know. There's no chazaka's near. It's chazaka, right? The status quo before that he's not a Nazir, right? So you go based on the chazaka. Hacha nachas lein Nazirus. Here, right? He's definitely taking the Nazirus upon himself. The question is, how many 30-day periods in Nazirus? Like, the amount of cucumbers that would fill it would be 10 periods in Nazirus. Or mustard seed is basically a number for the rest of his life. So he's definitely a Nazir. So he's a cheskes Nazir. The question is how long? So therefore, chazaka li'isura, and therefore Yehuda would agree, you go l'chumra in that case also. So, how are you going to take it away? The chazaka is a Nazir for as long, he's a Nazir until it stopped. You have to stop the Nazirah. So therefore, you go l'chumra. So Savik Daraisa l'chumra with a chazaka li'isura. So the Gemara says, "Ma'il lichziyei l'kupa kilum le'ak kishum midluin." Televei hakanta. So the Gemara persists. Like we said, let's say the box is filled not with mustard seeds, but with squash or cucumbers. Heavily takanta, right? Right, Hazakadak Naziros with the capital and Naziros, right, with a shuruk. What is that? The dot on top of the vav, right? What are we assuming over here? Even if we assume that it's mustard seeds, right? He's makabel the amount of Naziros, like the Tanakama, the Mishnah. He's makabel Naziros, the amount of Naziros, right? 30-day periods of Naziros, like that fit in the box. So whether you calculate it as cucumbers or mustard seeds, it's 30-day periods of Naziros. After the first 30-day period of Naziros, he's no longer a Nazir, right? So now we have to start again, right? Once he brings the karbanos on the 31st day, right? The question is, he started his Naziros again or not? So he's a chazaka where his Naziros is off. And the chazaka that is status quo after the first Naziros is completed, he's not a Nazir anymore. So then 0 to the Kabbalah. That's what we're thinking. That's what we assume the Tanakama, the vision of the Tanakama in our Mishnah. So the Gemara tries to reconcile to say that Rabbi Yehuda even can finish our Mishnah. Chedem Beis on top. Rabbi Yehuda Savarlak Rebbe. Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbe. Then unless you say Naziros, plural, right? If you say Hareini Nazir, right? We hold, Rebbe holds, that when you say Hareini Nazir Kasar Roshi, or to filling up the box, right? Mustard seeds, it's not the amount of mustard seeds is each mustard seed is worth a 30-day period of zeros. No. Let's say there's a million seeds of mustard, so a million days of Naziros, not a million periods of Naziros. Rabbi Yehuda Savar like Rebbe, the son, Rebbe Omer, Ein Zem Galech HaChashoshim Yom, Eizah Galech HaChashoshim Yom, Omer Real and Naziros, Kasar Rosh Kafar Aretz, U'Gechal Yom. Rabbi Yehuda, fine. So the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda maybe holds like Rebbe, and therefore we could say our Mishnah is both like Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda means Savar like Rebbe. Rabbi Yehuda over the hold like Rebbe. Atan Hareini Nazir K'minyan Mosachama. The end of our Mishnah said it. I taken a zeros like the amount of days in the solar year. Right? Once he completed his amount of the zeros, he died. If you say when he accepted 365 days of the solar year, he didn't actually take one zeros of 365 days. He took every day of the 365 days is another Naziros, it's not a 30-day period in Naziros. Right? So it sounds like he doesn't know like Rebbe, because Rebbe would say normally it would be 365 days. In this case, it would be a Kula Rebbe. Only one Nazir for 365 days for a year. Right? It makes sense that the Mishnah would end once he finished. He died because it indicated it was for a long time. It was for a 30-year period. He held like Rebbe, right? That he was makabel 1 to 0, so 365 days. Mi havi hashlama klal, right? Is that the way to finish off the Mishnah? To say, right, that he died? I mean, anyone could die of a heart attack. 1 year is not a long time. But Ode, a further question: does he hold like Rebbe? V'hatanya, Omer, Hareini Nazir minyan hilkidi kayetz. The amount of fig crops that come from a the amount of gatherings of figs. I guess you gather the figs after you harvest them in different piles. Minyan shiboli shmita, during the pass that they use, shmita pass, I guess this was, when you went through a field during shmita, you're allowed to pass through the field. A lot of people are allowed to pass through a field during shmita. It's hefker. So the amount of pass through the field. Monin naziros kamiyan hilkti kayas kamiyan shiboli shmita. So Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda. He says he's a Nazir, and you count it, right? Let's say there's 10 paths, so it's 10 30-day periods of Naziros. We don't say 10 days of Naziros, and if it's 10 days of Naziros, it's just one period of 30 days of Naziros. You can't have Naziros less than 30 days. You see, you don't count in terms of days, you count in terms of 30-day periods, like the Tanakama. The word says minyan shiny. If you say the word Hareini Nazir minyan, you mean to include a 30-day period. That's what you meant. Well, me shining the Rebbe minyan, but does Rebbe really hold his different time minyan? Tanya, right? It's already Nazir k'minyan mozachama. Mon Nazir's k'minyan mozachama. Kimei alavana. Right? The amount of days of a lunar year. Mona kimei alavana. Rebbe Omer. Rebbe says actually Yomer Naziros alai k'minyan yemos hachama k'minyan yemos halavana. He has to say Naziros, right? Rebbe says even though you're saying the word minyan, you have to say Naziros. If you don't say Naziros, we count the actual days. We don't count 30-day periods. So, Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbe in one regard. He argues in a different regard. He says only, right, normally you're makabel days, not 30-day periods, unless you say the Naziros. So, Rabbi Yehuda shining lemona, Rebbe shining lemona. Rabbi Yehuda, in one aspect, argues on Rebbe that if you say the word minyan, you don't have to say Naziros, right? You can say minyan, Hareini Nazir k'minyan. That also is like accepting 30-day periods upon yourself. So it could be Rabbi Yehuda does agree with our Mishnah. Hareini Nazir kol yimei chayai. Says I'm a Nazir the entire life. Hareini Nazir olam, Nazir forever. Hareini Nazir olam. That is the prototypical Nazir olam we talked about on Daf Da'alan and Beis and Hayam and Aleph, right? Where he's megaleach, he is a Nazir forever, and every 12-month period, according to Rebbe, he's shaves his head. He cuts his hair if it's too much. or a 30-day period. It's machlok, or 7 days. Machlokas we had on Daf It. But he's the case of another olam that is, was brought in contrast to another shimshon. However, if you were to say, afilu me hareze Nazir olam, afilu me shana, afilu elef shanim. He says, I'm a Nazir for 100 years, or even 1,000 years. Ain't a Nazir olam, a Nazir le'olam, he's a Nazir forever. Like we said, he's a Nazir for exactly 100 years, or for 1,000 years. So there's no kula, like we said, for a Nazir olam, where he could be, where his hair gets heavy, he can cut his hair every 12 months, according to Rebbe, which is accepted halacha. He has to take one Naziros for 100 years or 1,000 years, no matter how long he lives. They have prison sentences, for 2 life sentences or 1,000 years in prison. They do, in case someone will live that long. Talking about a Nazir v'achas. He's I'm a Nazir v'achas and 1. Monashtaim. What did he mean? I'm a Nazir 1 period and another period, 2 periods of Naziros. Ve'od, and then he added another word v'achas ve'od, and another one mona shlosh. Then he has 3 Naziros period v'shuv, and he adds the word v'shuv again mona arba. He has 4 periods in Naziros, 30-day Nazir, 120 days Naziros. Pshita, obvious. Ma'od the same of v'shuv kikuluhu v'ahavile shes. She's maybe when he said v'shuv, repetition, he was repeating on the first 3. So 3 times 2 equals 6. He has 6 periods in Naziros. Kamashma on the low. Food shuv just meant the 4th one. Taraban already Nazir. If he's I'm a Nazir, Sumkas Omer, Sumkas is telling you halacha. Hain, if he would say, Harini Nazir Hain, Achas, that's 1 Nazir. Digun, he says, I'm a Nazir Digun, Shtayim. Trigun, right, which sound like triangle. Shalosh, 3. Tetragon, now tetragon, I don't know, tetra is 4, right? Tetra is 4. Arba, pentagon, right? The Pentagon. If you're wondering why they call it the Pentagon in America, where they have the headquarters of the U.S. Defense Forces, it's from this Gemara, because Pentagon is Chamesh, so it's like, and there was apparently, someone in the armed forces that took a Naziris, 5 Naziris upon himself, and, he died in the Pentagon. They call it the Pentagon. That's Pentagon, like 5 walls, and also 5 Naziris, 5 periods of Naziris, which is basically 150 days. Tanarabanan, bias, eagle, Digon, Trigon, Puntigon, Ena Mitamim and Agoyim. This is not really related to Naziros, but a house could get saras. However, it's going to see it has to have exactly 4 walls. If it's round or it's Digon, it has only 2 walls. So you have 2 walls, and then a half circle, or Trigon, or it has 3 walls, a triangle, or Pentagon, or 5 walls, or 6 or 7. Ena Mitamim and Agoyim. Tatrigon Mitamim and Agoyim only has 4 walls. My time. Lamata hu Omer Kir Kiros, Lamalu Omer Kir Kiros, Arekan Arba. When it talks about Nigas Abatim, like a saras in the houses, it says the word kiros twice. Kiros is walls twice. So kiros is the minimum plural is 2. And it says it's 2 kiro twice, so that's 4. You get 4. You have to have exactly 4 walls in order to be matam saras. If it has more walls or less walls, it's not going to get too much saras. Hadranalach kol kinuye. We finish the first paragraph of Masechus Nazir. Stay tuned for Ian with Ben Sion, right, to discuss Machlokas in our Mishnah. It's a pretty fundamental machlokas between Rebbe and the Tanakama. We seem to paskin like the Tanakama. Usually the Tanakama is Rameir, right? It's not anonymously, it's usually Rameir. Rameir argues on Rebbe. And from the Gemara, he seems to argue on Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Shimon, all of them. And we tend to paskin like Rameir, like Tanakama, that when you say I'm a Nazir, Kisar Roshi, or Kafara Aretz, right? We say, when you mention, certain small things, every small thing corresponds to a 30-day Naziris. Now, sometimes this is Lakula, and sometimes it's the Chumrah. If it's something which is an infinite amount of things, like Sa'ar Roshi, so it's a Kula, because it's a million 30-day periods in the Naziris. So after every 30-day period, you could bring the Karbanos and cut your hair. But if you say, a million-day long Naziris, that means you have to fill 1 Naziris of a million days, you can never cut your hair. But you could also have, right, like a 365-day Naziris, like you say, Kiminyan Yemos Hachama, right, the days of the solar year. So that would be the opposite, because according to Rebbe, that would be a 365-day Naziris, only a Naziris for a year, as opposed to other opinion where you have, 365 30-day periods where you have to be knowing Naziris for 30 years. We'll talk more about this Machlokas, Ian with Ben Sion, coming up next.